Okay, well, by my reckoning, it is 10 o'clock now, so we will make a start. Just wait for everyone to be ready. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our June 22 meeting of the Exmoor National Park Authority. The first agenda item today is to elect a chairperson of the National Park Authority for the next 12 months. So, without further ado, may I seek nominations for chairperson, please? Andrea, then Eric, and then Mike. Thank you.
I was just saying, call you chairman then, but you are. I would like to propose Robin Milton, please.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for Robin, please? Jeremy Yabsley, thank you. Eric?
I was tempted to disagree, but I won't.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
I was going to propose him as well.
Okay, thank you. Do I have any other nominations for chairperson? Nick? May you please put your microphones on when you speak? Well, I will invite...
Does Robin want to stand?
I will invite him in a moment. Oh, thank you. Okay, so we have received one nomination for Robin Milton. Robin, are you willing to stand?
Yes.
Thank you.
Last year we stand,
Yes, okay, thank you.
6 years will be up then.
So please could I ask for a show of hands, and hands right up please, that you consent to their appointment. I see that as unanimous. Judy? Mike? Yep. Okay, in which case I am happy to announce that Robin, you are chairperson again. Thank you, and hand over to you for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you very much. Thank you, members, very much for your confidence. I will do my best to make sure that I don't disappoint. I do need glasses because these suitably extensive notes that I have here otherwise, which is yours, mine are over here, aren't they? We'll move on to item 2, the election of deputy chairperson. Can I have nominations, please? Mike? Thank you very much. Can I have a seconder? Thank you very much. Are there any other nominations for deputy chairperson? Can I have Andrea? Are you willing to stand? Thank you very much indeed. And all those in favour, please. And that is unanimous, Judy. Thank you very much indeed. That's very much appreciated, your confidence there. Undoubtedly, Andrea and I have worked quite well together in the last year or two and have divided our duties up. That it's actually worked quite well. It means that I don't have to attend to the local authority things, and she doesn't do any of the farming bits. So hopefully you get good value for money in the best of both worlds. We will move on to item 3, the election of deputy chairperson for planning. Andrea.
I'd like to nominate Stephen, please.
Thank you very much. Mike? Stephen? Seconded. Are there any other nominations for deputy chairperson of planning? All those in favour, please. That is unanimous as well. And I was assuming, of course, Stephen, that you are willing to stand. I wasn't going to give you too much choice, actually. So, thank you very much, Stephen. Very much appreciated. We will move on to item 4, apologies for absence. And I have apologies from John Petrinos, Evelyn Stacey, Penny Webber and Fran Smith. So there was no one else that's missing?
Dominic is going to be
Dominic,
late.
who's late because... Yep. Thank you. We'll move on to item 5, declarations of interest or lobbying of members. If I go around the table as per normal for any items on the agenda, has anybody any declarations of interest? No, there are none. Now on to item 6, Chairperson's announcements. You've been watching a set of slides up here, which is the SNPs conference, which was from the 25th to 22nd of the 5th. So if you've got any questions on them, don't ask me. Basically,
Don't ask me.
ask Claire.
Should I say just a few words?
Say a few words about it, Claire,
Okay.
because
So this is the annual conference of the Society of National Park Staff, and we were hosting it this year. It was a fantastic weekend. It's organised by 2 of our staff members, Kerry and Tom. They did a fantastic job in putting on a really good weekend. It was thoroughly enjoyed by everybody who attended. It's a UK-wide event, so we had representatives from all of the national parks, apart from Cairngorms actually. So it was a really good opportunity for staff to get together, to sort of, meet people from across other organisations, share what they do, and just have a really fun time. They stayed at Nettlecombe Court. They had some sort of fun activities and some study tours on the Saturday. So yeah, really great event, and I think really showcased Exmoor to its best. And the weather was fantastic, so that helped. Thank you.
thank you, Claire. Any questions about that? Lovely, thank you very much. There have been some changes to authority membership. I'd like to welcome as a new member Steve Griffiths, who some of you will know and some of you won't. Sat over here, Steve, as a Somerset West and Taunton appointee. And Mrs. Fran Smith, who's not here today, is a Somerset County Council appointee. And just to note, Marcus Crevice is now representing Somerset County Council rather than Somerset West and Taunton, but he's still here. Pleased to see you're still with us, Marcus. There were two departing members. James Hunt, Somerset County Council appointee, who'd been with us since April 2017, and Bill Revens, also Somerset County Council appointee, who'd been with us since April 17. There are some continuing appointees from Somerset West and Taunton. That was Andy Milne, Stephen Pugsley and Nick Thwaites. And from Somerset County Council, Christine Lawrence, Francis Nicholson, and the Somerset Parish Councillors, of course, Mike Ellicott, Penny Webber and Vivian White. Move on to item 7, and that's to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting authority held on the 3rd of May 22. And Vivian, thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Jeremy. All those in favour? That is...
Everyone.
Yeah, obviously with a notable abstention of Steve Griffiths, who wasn't here, so... Thank you very much. Now, any matters arising from those minutes in the manner in which we normally do? Look at page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Lovely, thank you very much. I'll turn to the page because I've got some wording to read then, haven't I? Is that for the next item?
No, it's a matter arising.
It's a matter arising.
Yep.
As a matter arising, a note here, the leadership team had considered the recommendations of the external auditor and the value for money review, which was presented to the authority at the May meeting. which most of you should remember, I would hope, following Gordon's presentation as well. The leadership team suggests that the ideal point for undertaking the self-assessment exercise is at the Standards Committee, as we would expect that to be their role, alongside the annual review of governance. The auditors have agreed this. Benchmarking data will be presented to the authority alongside other performance data, alongside the corporate plan reporting. So, as long as members are aware of that, are there any questions? If there are, I'm sure Gordon will answer them. Item 8, public speaking. We have one member of the public joined us, Mr. Roger Foxwell. Welcome, Roger. And give him the opportunity to take a seat with some items he has of importance for authority members to consider. Please
Thank you, Mr.
go
Chairman.
ahead, Roger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've just signed off the minutes of the last meeting. Well, as you're well aware, I was at that last meeting, and I'd like to question to you, Park Authority members, why the question that I asked wasn't minuted. So, if it's minuted, you can action it. And to date, I still haven't had a reply regarding your farming policy, which was in 2015. Things have moved on quite considerably, Mr. Chairman, since then, with farming and that. And you need to revise this plan. And it's a disgrace. I've got better things to do, Mr. Chairman, than come to a meeting yet again to pick up this Park Authority in replying to the farming community. You're a farmer, you know, you wouldn't refer to a document of 2015, would you? You'd be responding to something that's up to date, and it clearly shows that you know, we're not mentioning it enough. We're not mentioning enough in our documentation about food security in this national park, because you want to make 75% of the national park fit for nature. Nothing about food security, nothing about, it clearly shows by that picture there's less livestock. So I would like a reply now, Mr. Chairman, because you've had more than a month to reply about this. I'd like to have some members' discussion around the table so that you all agree that we need to revise this document. The other quick thing, spending over £500. The last thing updated on the website for members of the public to view was March of this year. I take an interest in seeing as to where the money's being spent in this park. And just the last thing, Mr. Chairman, we had an Exmoor meeting this last week. I'd like to ask if in your members' breakout forum that you might discuss the issue that we've got in Exford in writing to Magna, the big problems that there is in Exford regarding Magna. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foxwell. We will be having a members' forum later on. I am not permitted, as I said to you. That will be discussed, and I will bring it up. I'm not permitted under our standing orders to have a debate around an item raised by a member of the public at that meeting.
Why?
I will ensure, Mr. Foxwell, that you are given a definite...
Why wasn't it minuted?
I will make sure, we will check that and find out. I will make sure that you have a response as well to your questions.
When?
It will be actioned as soon as possible. I will do my best.
So there's no members' discussion?
I cannot facilitate a member's discussion following a question from a member of the public. Our standards, our code of conduct, which is a rather lovely document, does not permit that. Just as in a planning committee meeting, we are not allowed to debate a point from a member of the public. That's the rules I'm given. That's the ones I have to work with. So, thank you for raising the items, Mr. Foxwell. They will be considered, and I will make sure that you have a response. If we can move on to item 9, the external audit plan for the year ending 31st of March 22. And to consider the report of the Chief Finance Officer. I'll hand over to Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Gareth, Liam. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly, Gordon. Yes, morning everyone, morning members.
Great, I just thought I'd test that. Yes, so item 9 on the agenda this morning is the external audit plan. So this is their assessment of how they'll be undertaking to reach their opinion on the 21-22 accounts. And there's two main documents that support them. This is their the audit plan itself at Appendix 1, and also Appendix 2 shows the process by which their risk assessment is informed. So thanks to Gareth and to Liam for coming for us today to present this.
Thank you, Gordon. Would you like me to do a brief overview, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if members, obviously turning to item 9, can just look at section 2, introduction and headlines. I'll keep this relatively brief on the basis that the plan was agreed with Gordon back in May, so I'm sure you've all had time to read through it. I think first thing to say is that there's a slightly different audit team delivering the audit this year. So Liam has taken over from Mark as the manager, and Natalie taking over from Steph as the audit in charge. What I would say to members is that both Liam and Natalie have national park experience. They've worked at Exmoor and the other Southwest National Park previously, so they do have national park experience, and hopefully that's seen as a positive. And we've already obviously commenced our audit planning for 21-22. In terms of significant risk areas, they're consistent with the prior year. So we've got the standard risk about management override of controls. So they're possible areas where management could potentially manipulate the financial accounts in a particular way, involving areas where they take judgment and estimate, and some of those are set out in the risk assessment paper that Gordon referred to. And we do quite a lot of work around that to make sure we've got sufficient appropriate audit evidence, and also do a detailed review around the use of journals, particularly at the park. The other two areas are the valuation of the largest numbers on your balance sheet, so the valuation of your land and buildings and your proportion of the Somerset pension fund. Again, they are the risks that we've looked at in previous years. They involve a lot of assumptions, judgments and estimates from other specialists in terms of your valuation specialist and the actuary, and again a lot of detailed work to get to a position where we're comfortable with those values, given that they're in the several millions. And the reason why there's a lot of work involved in that is under the next heading, materiality. Because materiality is based on a percentage of your income and expenditure, and your income and expenditure is relatively small in comparison to obviously most local authorities. Our materiality that we work to there is only 90,000 this year. So when you compare that 90,000 with some of the sort of multiples of millions in terms of the valuation of land and buildings on your balance sheet and your proportion of the pension fund deficit, you can see why there's quite a lot of work involved to get to a position where we're comfortable that there's no risk of an error being more than 90,000 in those balances. Again, we have a trivial reporting limit that we'll report to you in the ISA 260 report later in the year when we're completing our audit work. So if you found any adjustments or errors above £4,500, we would report those. We've commenced our value for money arrangements review. So you'll recall last year was the first year of the more detailed value for money assessment. We've commenced the planning for that for this year. There will be a detailed review across governance, performance and financial sustainability. We've not highlighted any risks of significant weakness at this stage, and that review will continue during this calendar year. In terms of audit logistics, so Liam and I continue to meet on a regular basis with Gordon. That's been really helpful, and that will continue throughout the year. We did a very productive interim and planning visit back in March and April to make sure that the audit work was in a position that we can commence the final audit visit, which is expected in August and September. The deadline for audited accounts this year is the 30th of November. However, subject to receipt of information from other external audit colleagues at Somerset County Council and Somerset Pension Fund in terms of the assurances over payroll and your pension fund balance, we are hoping to sign off in advance of that, and we've targeted an October date for the ISA 260, I think the beginning of October at one of your meetings. The audit fee is highlighted there. I think a couple of things to say on that. One is, I guess, what I've referred to before, the low level of materiality versus some of the high value of some of your balance sheet items that require a lot of additional work to get to that position of material comfort. The raising of the bar from our audit regulator, the FRC, increases the level of sort of audit quality, and rightly so, but also the level of audit testing and documentation. Appreciate that is another uplift. What I would say is that it's been recognised now nationally that audit fees under the original PSA contract were not reflective of the audit work that was being required to be performed, and the government has responded to that with an allocation of money to the Department of Levelling Up last year, this year, and indeed next year for the last year of the current PSA contract. And all bodies, including national parks, will get a proportion of that 15 million. So an element of that uplift will be funded centrally, and indeed I think there has been in the past sort of rebates given by PSA as well to all bodies that opt into that particular regime. So that will take some of the impact of that uplift off the authority's own reserves, if you like, and it's all subject to PSAA approval at the end of the year in any case. And then the final point just to mention, Mr. Chairman, is that just to confirm that we are and continue to be independent of the authority and therefore can give an objective opinion on your accounts and VFM arrangements later this year. So those were sort of the headline messages, Mr. Chairman, that I wanted to go through, but obviously happy to take any questions, and Liam and I will endeavour to try and answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any questions? I think your comprehensive reporting of an explanation, Gareth, of the audit that's in front of us is obviously quite sufficient.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It is a two-way thing. You know, we've got a good, a sort of robust, professional but independent relationship with Gordon and his team. So we're hopeful that the audit will run well in the summer and the VFM work towards the autumn, and we're planning to get it all concluded this calendar year. So hopefully that will continue, Mr. Chairman.
And yes, I would have the same ambition there as well, Gareth. So thank you very much for that, indeed. Gordon, have you got anything to add?
No further points from me, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have a recommendation in front of us, and that is to receive the report with the associated appendices. Proposer?
Chairman, I'm happy to propose.
Thank you, Andrea. And Mike Ellicott. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Judy? Thank you very much. And thank you, Gareth. We'll look forward to seeing your work later in the year.
Yes, we'll see you later in the year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hope the rest of the meeting goes well. All the best, Gordon. We'll be in touch.
Lovely.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much indeed. We now move on to item 10, the Exmoor National Park Authority Local Plan Review, to consider Claire's report. Claire.
Thank you. Ruth is going to join us. We've got a few slides to show. We thought it'd just be helpful as a matter of public record and for those who haven't been as involved, just to run through a little bit of the background to the local plan review. Just wait for Ruth to get the slides up. Bear with us for a moment.
item obviously has other objectives at the moment.
Because I'm not normally sitting in this seat, you see. Okay, I'll just introduce the paper, and then Ruth will go through the detail of it. This is the review of the Exmoor National Park local plan. If you could move on to the next slide, please, Ruth. So as we are the local planning authority, we are responsible for the producing and updating of the local plan, which provides the policies for determining planning applications for the use and development of land. So the local plans, provide that planning framework for the area. And importantly, the adopted local plan reflects the special circumstances of the national park. And planning decisions need to be made in accordance with those policies, unless material considerations, determine otherwise. So, as the local planning authority, we are legally required to carry out a review of the local plan within 5 years of its adoption, to determine whether the policies are still valid and up to date, or whether we need to undertake either a full or partial review of the local plan. So as the Exmoor National Park was adopted in July 2017, we need to complete that process by this July, 5th of July 2022. And we have been going through a process of that review, and the paper before you now is the conclusions of that process. And Ruth is going to talk you through in a bit more detail what we've been doing.
So I think just as a starting point, it is a slightly confusing terminology, review of the local plan, because it normally means a full review. But this process, as Claire's outlined, is not the same as a full review of the local plan. Instead, this sort of 5-yearly requirement is more of a sort of check of whether a review is needed. So it's a sort of a process before a decision to make whether a local plan should be reviewed. So, as such, its job is to consider the evidence in order to understand whether a review is needed. And there is some guidance in national policy, specifically in the National Planning Policy Framework and in planning practice guidance. So simply, I suppose, is the question we have asked ourselves is the plan working, and are any changes needed to it? So this next slide sets out the broad timetable or approach that have been used as part of this local plan 5-year review, and it was shown to members at the start of the process in 2020, and it's been used to guide the approach that we followed. I think it's also worth just saying that members will be aware that they've been involved from the start of the process, including meetings through the member working group, the Planning Policy Advisory Group, in December 2020, then 3 meetings in 2021, and a further 3 this year, as well as several updates. And also member representatives attended a stakeholder workshop at the end of last year, as well as just a further kind of discussion. We also held a duty to cooperate meeting with local authorities, neighbouring authorities, in September last year to look at cross-boundary issues, and we've engaged with statutory consultees, and then, as I've already said, we held a stakeholder workshop in December last year, which was followed by a survey which finished at the end of February. So just a bit more detail on what the review has involved. The first job really was to assess the policies against national policy changes. So this is about looking at what's happened since the plan was adopted in 2017, and there have been several iterations of the National Planning Policy Framework, for example. We've used non-statutory but nevertheless very helpful guidance through the Planning Advisory Service, which has produced a checklist for national policy changes, and using that has demonstrated that the Exmoor National Park Local Plan is still policy compliant. As I've already said, we've updated and looked at and analysed updated evidence. For example, importantly, we've updated the housing need affordable figure from the local plan using the most up-to-date data, which has shown a similar but slightly lower figure than was in the adopted plan, although you'll be aware that we use local need housing surveys as the evidence for planning applications for affordable housing. And we've also analysed, for example, the rural enterprise Exmoor work that's been done, that extensive work on the economy. We've looked at the most up-to-date data for the authority monitoring reports for the period of the local plan. They haven't flagged up any significant issues, the main one being, though, the relating to housing or affordable housing delivery. We've looked at the appeal decisions that we've received, and these don't show any reason to suggest the need to review policies. Appeal decisions continue to support the development plan policies in the adopted plan. We had helpful discussions with the authority's development management team to consider their comments on how policies are being implemented when determining planning applications, and also separately to look at changes that have happened to permitted development rights and to youth classes since 2017. And then, as I've said, we had discussions with duty to cooperate partners, which hasn't identified strategic priorities or policies that require review, and then the stakeholder responses that we've received through both the workshop and the survey, which are summarised in the topic papers and the summary report, which is appended to this authority paper. So, just to follow on with a bit more detail on the details of the review. So, as I said, we've had the report, we've produced 3 themed topic papers, which set out the evidence and key findings of the review, and the broad themes are environment, housing and community, and economy, which cover a range of different things under those headings. The key, I think, aspects of the environment theme that we've identified have been biodiversity net gain, which wasn't a phrase that was in use when we adopted the local plan, but Natural England has confirmed that they consider biodiversity net gain ambitions can be implemented under the existing policy framework. Another emerging theme or issue was design. You'll know that we've agreed as authorities, to review the design guide, and I think useful information coming through the review has been the need to consider affordability, to look at modern design, although actually local plan policies do enable modern design, biodiversity aspects, and also, of course, climate change considerations. And then crossing over with that somewhat is obviously climate change, the need to respond to the climate emergency, to enable responses across the board to climate change, and also through the particularly the online survey raised the climate change issues raised as in terms of the railway, the Linton and Bartsville Railway. Moving on to housing and community, we've got, as I said, updated evidence on local housing need, but monitoring has demonstrated that the local plan housing strategy and policies are still appropriate to the needs of local communities. A number of delivery issues with affordable housing have been identified, but it's considered that these do not require policy change. I think that's the point, it's about the policies. Some are unrelated to planning. Then moving on to economy, obviously there have been changes since we've lived through a worldwide pandemic. It's had an effect on tourism, of course. There's been changes, it would appear, in working practices and increasing working from home, increased importance of digital connectivity for Exmoor and elsewhere. However, looking at the monitoring of the plan and the implementation of the plan, there doesn't appear to be significant delivery issues related to any of the actual policies in the plan. assessments of local circumstances and priorities haven't identified new social, environmental or economic issues that suggest changes to the plan are needed. It has considered the policies are flexible, I think that's the point, to respond to future changes in a time of great uncertainty. And this includes changes to the economy following COVID and the UK's exit from the European Union. Some responses have indicated that there may be scope to ensure that existing policy opportunities are understood, for example, in relation to working from home. But that would be something to discuss at a future time. I think moving on now to Claire.
So just the final slide with our recommendations. So as Ruth has outlined, the kind of conclusions that officers have drawn from this process is that the review of evidence indicates that a local plan review does not need to be triggered, and we have set out the reasons in summary in point 3.1 in the report. However, we do acknowledge that there have been a number of comments and issues raised throughout the process, which we have listened carefully to and considered and provided a response to through the process that we've gone through, and all of the comments that have come out of the survey and the workshop have a response in the schedule that we have made available online along with all the other documentation. I think it is worth noting that not all of these can be dealt with through planning policy. The local plan doesn't have the powers to deal with all of them, but there are a number of things, as Ruth has highlighted, where we feel that there is more that we can do to support effective implementation and delivery of the plan, but things not through a review, but by taking proactive and quick action now to address some of those issues. So in terms of the recommendation, we are proposing that we do not trigger a plan review, but that we put together a plan of work which addresses those issues that we've highlighted in the plan here. So on the environment, we're going to be looking at updating the design guidance and incorporating sustainability and climate change into that. We'll be producing some further guidance on biodiversity net gain, because although the requirements, the statutory requirements, can be undertaken within the current policy hooks, we feel that there would be benefit in having some more specific guidance on how to do that. And we are looking anyway at updating local validation requirements, which will be able to incorporate some of those issues as well. On housing and community, I think this is an area that we're particularly keen to continue to address those concerns over affordable housing delivery with further guidance for applicants. And I think the work that we've been doing through the review has actually indicated that there is now a good pipeline of delivery coming through, which is really good to see and very positive. And we want to sort of work with our partners and the housing authority to support that. And then on the economy, again, continued partnership working through the Rural Enterprise Exmoor process. So that's our conclusions as officers, members, and we have the recommendation in front of you, and we'll be happy to hear your comments and take any questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Ruth. I've got Stephen Pugsley first, and then Mike Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As Claire said, the Planning Policy Advisory Group met on a number of occasions to consider the review process and the potential of having a full-scale review undertaken. And I think on balance, the conclusion of the group is expressed in the recommendations that are before us this morning. So I am happy to support them. One of my more sympathetic correspondents recently pointed out that the plan consists of 395 pages, of which only 58 pages are actually policy. The rest is guidance, context and interpretation on the remainder of the pages. And this is what I think the Planning Policy Advisory Group considered should be kept under constant review and updated, supplemented or reconsidered as necessary. So what we didn't want is for us to have gone through this consideration now and for it to stop. We do feel strongly, I think, that this now needs to be kept under constant review, and it's something that members need to continue to be involved with. And so therefore PPAG should continue to meet on a regular basis, at least quarterly. As you will see from the member appointments item later, the chairman and deputies plus 7 appointed members are the body officially, but all members are welcome to attend it, and indeed many over the last few months have done. So I think it's a key opportunity for members to be able to continue to engage in that process and make sure that the plan is as fit for purpose as it can possibly be. So I think I would like, if I may, to add to that recommendation that the Planning Policy Advisory Group do continue to meet to consider the ongoing effectiveness of the plan on at least a quarterly basis. But with that addition, I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Pugsley. And my list of people, Mike Kelly next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean...
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Christine.
Yes, Chair. I'm very happy to second that recommendation. It's been a very thorough exercise with the involvement of members. I've taken a particularly active part as well in terms of facilitating some of the workshops, but it's been a very positive process throughout. I think one of the conclusions is looking at the wording of the policies in particular. They provide the flexibility to address some of the issues that have been identified this morning. Climate change, for example, policy CCS1 is well worded. It's certainly fit for purpose in terms of determining applications, including controversial applications. In terms of biodiversity as well, the policies under CE, S1 and S3 in particular will address the biodiversity and the requirement for biodiversity net gain, which is a new development, which all planning authorities are having to handle and accommodate. But with the guidance of Natural England, again, the wording of the policies is such that we are able to apply those principles. So subject to that, and with the active, very positive engagement of members, I'm very happy to support the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too welcome this report. I welcome what members have said so far. I want to make a couple of comments about what I have been hearing from parish councils and others. They have seen, some certainly have read the papers for the meeting today, and were worried that, in a sense, the covering report and conclusion was all about the positive and didn't pick up their concerns. It's meant a lot of explaining from our point of view that actually that the guidance is what needs to be dealt with as the best way of achieving what we need, and that has not been clear to them, which has been something that we've been having to put right. Now that's perhaps a little bit of learning for the future. There has been a little bit of worry, I suspect misplaced, about the data feeling, for example, that second home data has been based on a 10-year-old census. Now, I know you've been telling us that you've been using the most up-to-date data, and that's fine. Now, coming out of all the thoughts particularly from parishes and the discussions that we've had, I would like to propose an amendment to the recommendation. the second one, the second recommendation, we note the results of the policy check of the local plan, and and not only note. So the first recommendation: note the results of the 5-year policy check of the local plan, and note views expressed on the guidance. Agree with the conclusions of the policy check that a review of the local plan is not required. However, guidance, concerns about guidance need to be addressed, and agree to, and certainly the Planning Policy Advisory Group needs to be mentioned there, and the regularity of meetings, that the constant review needs to be mentioned, and I haven't got the words written down because I didn't do that. But it's more than address the points raised during the review through additional guidance, communications and partnership working. No, it's actually reviewing whether they're right, as Stephen has said. Do they need to be reviewed? Do they need to be replaced? Do they need to be amended? Do they need to be added to? But just layering additional on, I don't think will address the concerns. And this is not about allaying people's anxieties. It is about making the policies that we have work better. So I just feel we need to tighten up the recommendations to be much clearer and much more explicit with people as to what we're going to do.
Thank you, Francis. Yes, well made. I will get to that bit in a minute. Christine, did you have anything to add?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to thank Claire and Ruth for their hard work. This was, I would like to think, extremely robust meetings. We didn't take anything for granted. We worked through systematically, and we all challenged different areas of the report. And I think we've done a good job, but there's still more to do. We can't presume that for the next 10 years everything will work beautifully and everything will be fine. I think the challenge is still here, and we need to continually look. And I'm so pleased that Stephen has suggested that those that can and are involved and want to get involved in this come and meet regularly, because I think we owe it to the community to continually look at the concerns, the challenges of the future. This is very much a changing world, and much as we have plans for the future, sometimes we have to look at them again and review and think how differently we can use the information. We've got a massive information, and the use of it and how we enable things to happen as opposed to stop things happening. So I think most of us feel that we want to do more in this area, and we won't sort of sit back and think, oh, everything's going to be fine. We will continue to look at where we are, where we need to be, and how we need to address the issues of the community here.
Thank you, Christine, very much. Susan, then Eric. Right. Susan, Eric.
Yeah, just, sorry, 2 points that have been raised before in the discussions on the local plan review. The first question is there any mechanism within the recommendations to allow any small tweaks to current policy wording, or is that out of the question?
Ruth?
Thanks, Chairman. We can't change the wording of the policies without going through the whole local plan process.
That's too bureaucratic. So that is obviously too bureaucratic, so the 2 points I was going to refer to basically don't apply.
Right, thank you, Eric.
You know, the first thing that became really apparent at the housing meeting at Exford last week, you know, we had the young people there who are experiencing it at the sharp end, and they got different issues, but the central one is they got no base, i.e. a house, you know, attached, adjacent to a local settlement. If they got that one, every other issue they raised would flow from that, and they would have control over it. But the big issue is the unavailability of small parcels of land in right locations, and without them, they can do nothing.
Thank you, Eric. I think some really valid points there raised. And I think they came up several times at the Planning Policy Advisory Group meetings, Ruth, wasn't it? Was it Mike? Did you signal, or Vivian, or did I? Was there anything? All right, Dominic.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Sorry I was late this morning. Bad diversions on the road. If I knew any local councillors, I'd be complaining to them. But actually, it made me think about that issue of guidance while I was driving along the wrong road. And I think I've said before with this local plan, when I heard there was going to be a review of it, I thought, oh, great, there's a chance to, of course, if you've got a chance to change it, you change it. And I've been persuaded by those excellent PPAG meetings, which are some of the best I've attended since I've been on the park. Really interesting, really substantive, and also it made me realise that no, it's not quite as simple as that. And actually, that issue Stephen just said about the amount of the document that's actually guidance rather than actual policies. But I also cast my mind back to when I first moved to the park and tried to go through that plan to try and work out whether I could do something, and found it very difficult. It is not a user-friendly document. It doesn't even have an index. It's very hard to actually get your way through it and actually and everything's cross-referenced. So all the time you're trying to go down one road, and then immediately you've got to go and now I've got to go back to find HC21, and that's got to go back to LZ, and I mean you're just all over the place with it. It is not a useful document, and I think. Because often we hear that people regard planning and, if you like, the policy and the local plan as an obstacle to development, and of course we're always trying to say, no, it's not an obstacle, it's the means by which you can make things happen, like, for instance, to release new parcels of land and to build houses. And I think if we could help think of it in terms of explaining how this plan can act as stepping stones rather than obstacles. And I think we used the word pathways in one of the meetings that we had. So guidance for me is a bit too woolly. And I also agree that I think the recommendation as it stands at the moment doesn't actually reflect the real force of feeling that we need to do something quite substantial to do additional work alongside this plan. And if we could think of pathways like that, if, let's say, we know somebody who has some potential small parcels of land near a hamlet or a village, what's the pathway? How do you release that? How do you get that into a process? How would you match it to people that might want to do a self-build on it? On the other hand, if you're a self-builder potentially, how do you get connected to that? How do you find those parcels of land? And how does the plan help you do that? And what do you need to tick in terms of boxes to make that happen? And then the climate change issue, which has changed since the local plan was done. And I think this is now guidance not just for residents, but guidance for us as well. That actually, I think sometimes we rehearse the same argument again and again because we haven't actually agreed necessarily a particular form of words around the climate change emergency in a way that we'd respond to certain things in a certain way that would still give us some flexibility. So that, I think, is the thing that's still missing here. Guidance, I think, doesn't quite cover it. I think we need to unpack that and actually try and, really define what we mean by that. Thanks.
Thank you, Dominic. Anything you'd like to say there, Ruth, before we move on?
I think just to say that we've heard all your helpful comments, thank you. Obviously, we'll wait to see what your decision actually is, but we would be intending to come back to you with a detailed work programme of what is meant. Sorry, I said thank you for all your helpful comments. Subject to the decision today, then we would be looking to come back to you with more detail on what guidance would involve and what you would like to call it and the programme and timetable for it. But we're not quite there.
Thank you, Ruth. I've got Jeremy and then Stephen. Jeremy, did I miss anyone else this side? Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to say I've enjoyed the PPAG side of things, and there has been some very close discussion, and it is clear to me at least, and I hope I'm not being naive, that there are a number of our adopted policies that we are going to have to give guidance that is slightly different to the guidance that was first published. and it is those policies in particular that we're going to be challenged on. And what I would say is that we've got to look forward to the next local plan period, underline the policies that are now controversial, and make sure that they're the first things that we seek to adopt. As a body, we're going to come under increased scrutiny when we have controversial planning applications, and one has already been mentioned today. And we need to be in a position that we can usefully and sensibly defend whatever comments come our way. I don't think I need to say any more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Claire.
Yes, I just need to be clear with members, given what you've said, Jeremy, that we cannot change the policy and how it's, what we're talking about here is obviously in any planning decision there's always an element of planning judgment, and what we're trying to do is to help assist in that process by providing further guidance and support for how the plan is interpreted and delivered. It is not about changing the substance of the policy. So I just want to be very clear that if that is the case, we have to go through a review process, which is a statutory process. But what we're able to do now is to provide some further help, as Dominic was indicating, to people who want to, do things in terms of what are the best pathways of achieving that within the current planning policies. So just needed to be clear that that is the situation, so that members are making the decision on that understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Stephen, and then Mike Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just picking up some of the points that were raised, especially by Mrs. Nicholson, but also Dominic. Those of us that were at the Exmoor Young Voices Summit at Exford last week, you could go away with the impression that it was all about housing and planning. Actually, it was about a number of other issues as well, but it did tend to get focused down onto housing. But one of the things that became very clear as we were going through is that many of the issues are not really associated with even development control, let alone the plan. There are a whole range of issues, including land availability and how individuals are made aware of that, is a completely different field of work, and that has to be handled in a different way. And I think we have to be careful that we don't land everything on the plan, because there are a huge amount of other streams of work that have to be undertaken to address some of the concerns, particularly of young people across the moor. Having said that, this is extremely important. And I wonder, therefore, if I could just tighten up a little bit on the recommendation that I made earlier, picking up the point that Mrs. Nicholson said. I would suggest that we, if we may, we add slightly to recommendation 2, that we agree with the conclusions of the policy check that a review of the local plan is not required, but accept that concerns about the guidance within it need to be addressed, so that that is clear that we've noted that. And then for the additional point 4, and I hope, Christine, you're happy to second these, that the Planning Policy Advisory Group meet regularly to review and consider updates and supplements to the guidance as necessary.
Could you please repeat that last bit, please?
Yes,
Number
the
4.
Planning Policy Advisory Group should meet regularly to review and consider updates and supplements to the guidance as necessary. Is that okay?
Is that in substitute for recommendation 3?
No, that's additional 4. Additional.
And Stephen, just to be clear on recommendation 1, that was to include Mrs. Nicholson's amendment, was it?
Well, I
or
think
have you removed that? You've moved that down to a
no,
different item.
What I was trying to do was to add to the second recommendation that we do note that there were concerns about the guidance and that these need to be addressed. I think that was the substantial point that Mrs. Nicholson
Thank you,
was
Stephen.
making.
Would that be acceptable, Francis?
Yeah.
Thank you.
My next
And
point
if
is
Christine is happy to second that.
Francis, we need
The-
your
the-
microphone on, sorry.
Sorry. I just with recommendation 3, I don't want us to get stuck with the idea that what we've agreed is that we're only going to do additional guidance.
I think
So if we actually remove the word additional to progress work to address points during the review through guidance, communication and partnership working, I would be happy with. I don't want to get, will anybody out there getting the idea that we're just going to layer more words on top of the words we've already got?
I was trying to get around that with my recommendation 4.
Yes, I'll make it short, Chairman. I think we have the process in place so that we can review guidance, because it's not set in stone, the local plan. As Claire has said, the upper case policies aren't there to be changed, but they're flexibly worded and generically worded that we can address most circumstances. But in any event, if we look at 4.1 of the report, it talks about adding supplementary planning guidance. Now, though that supplementary planning guidance sits underneath the uppercase policies, it can't replace those policies, but because those policies are generally worded, it provides a great deal of opportunity to come up with guidance that does reflect changing circumstances, as we've been talking about today. And the other point is about the planning system is not there to be a block to development. We know that. I mean, it's no longer development control, it's development management. And with the Planning Act, the most recent Planning Act, it actually puts a duty on the planning authority for the first time to facilitate the delivery of sustainable development. So all those policies are actually directing us towards the delivery of sustainable development. And it's right that people do recognise that need, and that the wording of the plan does pick that up. But it is a thread that should be running throughout the entire document. So I think, subject to that recognition, which I know is recognised in this room, and subject to the preparation of the supplementary planning guidance, which is permitted and doesn't trigger a review of the local plan, I think the process will enable us to get to where we want to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mike. Eric, and then we'll...
Just a small point, it relates to something Dominic said about the local plan is not that easy to follow. And I think a good example would be, 12 months ago there was an application come forward for a succession dwelling at Trentershow, and it pretty much all rested on the viability issue, where experts employed by this authority stated that off-farm income could not be included, but yet the policy actually said it could. But to find that was a nightmare. I think I found it bedtime reading, the last point of the eyelids closing. But that decision rested on that, and it's almost impossible to find. Is there something that could be, I don't know how to phrase this now, to get, help me, Mr. Chairman. You know what I'm trying to say.
I'm thinking what you're talking about.
No,
in reality, is the guidance.
Yeah, but the simplicity. In an ideal world, it would be easy to follow the local plan, but it's not, as Dominic said. Now, for future references, how can that be made so wrong decisions aren't made, which in effect will be contrary to what the plan says, because it's so easy to do.
Before we answer that, Andrea, then Jeremy.
I have a solution.
I'm glad about that.
I looked to the chair, I should have looked to the vice chair.
Exactly. Always get a woman to do it. Which we're not supposed to say these days, so delete that from your head. It says in 4.2 there's going to be a further programme of work comes back in August. The word August worried me slightly. I didn't know we were having a meeting in August. I'm sure many people won't be here because it's August and we're not supposed to have a meeting in August. Yes, I think everybody's heard the point now. Ruth and Claire have heard all these various things, because the decision today, I think, I was absolutely fine with the recommendation, probably as it is, although I'm happy to vote for it, of course. But I think that all hinges on what that programme of work says, taking into account all the things, including what Eric's just said, that we come up with how we're going to deal with all these issues, including the user guide to the plan, which is difficult to navigate. Does that solve everything?
There is a shortened version, but
Yeah, we've got one here, or Dr. Kelly's got one because he's a better student. I think.
Jeremy, and then I'm going to Claire.
I'm just continuing the wisdom of my neighbour and just saying that I think the work that might be going on in August or perhaps September should include a user's guide of how to do things. We're all aware of the issues that are causing the problems. If we were able to say, if you're looking for a farming application, follow this, that and the other. If you're looking for one involving Windows, follow this, that and the other. If you look, yes, you know. And so we go on.
Right, Claire.
I just repeat my earlier comment that the decision we're making here is not to review the plan, whether it be the policies or the supporting documentation that goes with it. We're not able to do that unless we go through a process. What we are recommending is that we can address the issues that have been raised and that we've listened to through further guidance or user guides or how to do things, which is supplementary to the plan. It can be adopted as supplementary guidance, which goes through a process, but that gives it weight then in decision making, or it can just be there, to help applicants or whoever as they're, considering what they need to do. So that is our proposal for you. We need to determine whether we are sticking with the original recommendations or amending them as has been proposed. So I think we just need to address that point, Chairman, and look at Councillor Pugley's proposed amendments and perhaps have a vote on those first.
First of all, Francis, then Dominic.
I just want to be absolutely clear when you say that the plan and the supporting documentation cannot be changed. That the supporting documentation doesn't mean the majority of the pages in the document, which is the guidance. That it's the information on which instead, presumably it's the information on which the plan is based.
Yes, so any words that are in the local plan itself, with the policies and the text that accompanies it, everything in the plan is something which has been through a statutory process to prepare and develop and agree, and been through consultation, all the rest of it. So we're not proposing to change those. What we are proposing to do is to provide supporting information which helps in decision making as you interpret and implement those as members in your planning decisions, or for applicants or those who are looking to bring forward planning proposals. So that is supplementary to what is in the local plan.
I would just reference for information Dr. Kelly's comments earlier on about the opportunities that the local plan, don't forget, is there to facilitate its development management. And I think it's not there to prevent development, and it's ensuring that those policies are interpreted in the appropriate manner to ensure that that's what we do. We do development management, not prevention of development. And those are two very, very different things. Dominic.
No, just very quickly, picking out exactly the same point, because that rang an alarm bell for me, because the previous comment made me think from Stephen was, oh, this is great, because the policies can't change, but obviously most of this document is guidelines, and those we can adjust. Well, we can't. And this also means that, therefore, we're going to create a situation where presumably we're going to now have some supplementary guidelines. What happens when we have a decision whereby the supplementary, we're basically arguing about the extent to which the supplementary guidelines are followed, or the original guidelines in the original document? We only produce the supplementary guidelines in order to basically put, if you like, a slightly different tilt on a particular policy in the light of, for instance, the climate change crisis and all the rest of it. And I can see us actually getting bogged down in a situation where, well, basically what has preeminence, to use a current word.
The plan is the preeminent document, and decisions have to be made in accordance with the plan. Anything that we produce supplementary to that has to sit underneath the plan. It can be considered as a material consideration as you are, considering your particular applications. So it can't be contrary to, but it can provide further guidance and help in terms of how those policies are applied in particular circumstances. So that is the difference. And, as with all of these things, this is why we have a planning committee. There is always an element of judgment and degree that is placed, officers consider in their recommendations to you, and that, members consider when you come to a decision. There is never any black or white. But I think it's just very important that we are clear here in the decision that you're making now, is that what's in the document at the moment is the adopted plan, and that anything further would be supplementary to that. It would add further information, but it can't be contrary to that.
I've got Eric to comment.
Just a very brief point. I think it's worth remembering that any local plan cannot cover every eventuality. And that's where the supplementary guidance comes in as material considerations that can sometimes make the difference and make a decision obvious, whereas, like I said, they cannot cover every eventuality.
Thank you, Chairman. It's interesting sitting here listening to all these debates and everything, but what I can understand is the plan is such a fuzzy document and the documents that go with the plan are such a fuzzy document that it leaves enough leeway to do some modifications. I mean, is that a sensible way of looking at it? It does make you question, quite honestly, is that why the hell you have a plan if it's so fuzzy anyway? It's like, do you want coffee? How strong do you want coffee? Well, I actually don't want any coffee in it. I want some milk instead. I don't really know what to say. It just seems to be we're arguing about fuzzy logic here.
Comment from Dean.
The fuzzy logic.
Yeah, I've tried not to get too involved, but I'm just getting slightly concerned that we're still not quite understanding what you're voting on today. What you are voting on is whether the local plan and the policies within it and the strategies that are supported through the local plan are suitable, are fit for purpose, do what we want to do, meeting the challenges that we have. That is fundamentally the only thing that you are looking to do today, is to say, yes, we think that generally that these policies do everything that we want to do, and we can use them in future decision making. And that means that we are saying that the plan still offers sustainable development, that we're saying yes to the right type of development in the right place, and we're saying no to the wrong type of development in the wrong place. The discussion around the supplementary guidance, I'm just concerned that it's an important point. I appreciate that members will want to ensure that work is robust enough. But you will have opportunities to sort of comment on that in terms of what comes forward at the next stage, and that's what Ruth and Claire have set out today to you, which is we'll come back to you, taking on board everything you say to make sure it is robust. But those supplementary planning guidance will never say anything other than what the policy is looking to direct. It is there to help applicants, help decision makers to come to that view on those instances where there are those challenging cases where it might be in the balance and we're sort of trying to get our head around whether it complies with policy. That additional piece of supplementary planning guidance might help us interpret the plan and the policies, and likewise agents and applicants to do the same to come to a decision. But fundamentally you are here to say whether the local plan needs a review or not. And I'm just worried we keep on going off onto tangents, and then there's terrifying words like, well, it allows some breathing space or some scope. It doesn't. Either the plans are acceptable and the policies are robust, or they're not. That's what you're looking at. Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Dean, very much. I have a final comment from Stephen. We'll try and sum up and we'll move to a vote.
Thank you. With all due respect, as they say, I think what I was proposing, amended, is a pragmatic answer to the concerns that have been raised, carefully phrased, so that we are dealing with supplementary guidance and working on that, but we all know how we will be able to participate in that process of making sure that the supplementary advice is as clear and as helpful and as robust as possible. And that is when members will have to engage, I think, and to make sure that all of the concerns of which we are aware, both externally and within this organisation, are properly addressed. Picking up points that members have made, actually the PPAG over the last few months has, I think, dealt very interestingly with a number of those issues, and I've no doubt that in the light of those conversations and the further conversations to come, we will be able to produce some very helpful supplementary guidance that will continue to inform the policies.
Thank you, Stephen. I think, listening to the debate, there was a bit of a danger during the course of this that we actually, the authority meeting sort of developed itself and became the Planning Policy Advisory Group. There is a group that's specifically set up, and several members have been part of that, to consider all these concerns. And these concerns all have been raised within that group at one point or another. And Ruth has noted several of them down here within this paper. As your planning officer said, this paper is all about whether we trigger a planet review of our planning document or not. I think there's a couple reality checks to remind members, actually, in that if we trigger a full review of planning policy, that will be not an instantaneous change of any sort to planning policy. It is a several years long process. In reality, what we're looking at here is providing ourselves with the opportunity, through the Planning Policy Advisory Group work, to look at all those areas of concerns that have been raised both within this room and externally within our local population, to give us the opportunity to look at interpretation and facilitation of our local plan to make sure it's delivering the best value that we can, sticking within those very, very definite guidelines, legal guidelines which we have to stick to. This planning policy document is the approved document. We cannot change that. It has to go back to the Planning Inspectorate. What there would be a danger, in my view, is if we went to full review at the moment, we are stuck with a completely unchanged policies and interpretations for that time until we get a new local plan approved by Inspectorate. Is that correct, Ruth? Look at where the opportunities lie within this. In some ways, ensuring that we're adopting a policy of looking at our guidance, developing supplementary guidance, and addressing the concerns and problems that we see within this will put us in a very, very good position when the review of that document starts to take place. We will have already started to address the problems rather than waiting for that point to arise. And I think it's really important that we try and do some of that. It will not deal with the concerns of everyone, and it will not actually deal with changing things instantaneously. But planning is not one of those things that changes instantaneously. We have to understand where the concerns of the population, the local population lie, and attempt to address them. But we have also to deliver that planning policies that we have in front of us. I think we've had, Mr. Pugsley has put forward a proposal which he has amended slightly.
Can I clarify what that proposal is? Because I think we need to, it's been seconded as well, and it has been amended in the light of the comments from Councillor Nicholson as well. So at the moment, what I understand, and I might suggest, Councillor Pugsley, if you're happy, that we delete reference to guidance, because I think that provided some confusion. So the proposal that I have noted, which to check with you, is that we amend point 2 of the recommendations so that it reads that the authority agrees with the conclusions of the policy check that a review of the local plan is not required, but accept that concerns raised need to be addressed. And then we add a point 4, that the Planning Policy Advisory Group meets regularly to consider the ongoing effectiveness of the local plan. Is that as you proposed and was seconded?
Not really, no.
Would you like to clarify what your proposal is?
Well, it was as I read it, which was rather more specific. And I think this is part of the concern that there is being expressed here this morning, that there does need to be a little bit of definite response, so that we are absolutely clear about what it is that we have considered, heard, and are endeavouring to do. Now, I see that you feel that the concern about the guidance, which I'd noted in recommendation 2, you omitted the word guidance from that. It is a concern about the guidance that appears in the plan at the moment, but that rather than see there be a big concern that will stop this moving forward this morning, and perhaps get us into the stage where, heaven forfend, we as members decide we have to move forward to a full-scale review, I will accept, Claire, what you've just said in respect of item 2. However, in respect of item 4, what I said was that the PPAG should meet regularly to review and consider updates and supplements to the guidance as necessary, or to guidance as necessary. Well, I think we can make sure it's at least quarterly.
So I think the main point is to clarify that when we're talking about guidance, we're not talking about the words that are printed in the local plan. We're talking about additional documentation. So we would have item 2 read, agree the conclusions of the policy check that a review of the local plan is not required, but accept that concerns raised need to be addressed. Item 4, that the Planning Policy Advisory Group meets regularly to review and consider updates and supplements to the guidance as necessary.
Yes, I can see Mrs. Nicholson on my right saying that needs to be at least quarterly, and I did refer to that earlier. I personally prefer it to be bi-monthly, to be honest, but I think if we say regularly, members are concerned enough about it to know how often it needs to meet, and we will make sure that it does. So I think I'm happy to leave it at regularly. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. We will be in your hands as to how
Indeed.
frequently you wish to meet. So I don't think that's, I would hopefully reassure members that that's not something to be concerned about. Okay, so I'm hoping that members are clear then that that is the motion that has been placed in front of you to amend the recommendations as we have just outlined. Then, Chairman, over to you for
I have the proposer in Stephen, and the seconder was? Christine. Members, all those in favour?
I make that 13. Mike, did you agree 13? 13 in favour?
Yeah. Those against? And those abstaining? 1, 2,
2
3.
abstaining. 3 abstaining, sorry. 3 abstaining.
Thank you very much. That is carried, and I am sure through the guidance of our Chair of Planning as well, we will ensure that this approach is continued. I think there are enough concerns have been raised that that we will address that. Ruth, thank you very much indeed, and we will need your continuing work on this for some time. Members, I think we've had an hour and a half. I think it'd be appropriate time to take a what, 10-minute break till 22 maybe? At the moment? By that clock. 22 at that clock.
Thank you.
And then we will return. Thank you very much. Right, members, we will resume the authority meeting and we will move to item 11, which is our annual appointments list. Now, there are within these annual appointments groups a selection of people who have asked for places. There are one or two changes that are needed because some we have too many, one or two we don't have enough, and one or two it's not the right mix of members from different parts of the representation, which we will address as we go through. Just to note, new members, and I think that's particularly aimed at Steve there, will be given an opportunity to shadow any groups they've got a specific interest in, so that you get the opportunity to both contribute and see what's happening. When we get to the Exmoor Consultative and Parish Forum group, we will at that point vote a chair and deputy chair in for them to deal with themselves. So, Claire, anything to say before we start? Right. Starting with page 1 of the appendix, the final accounts committee. That looks like everything is in order. Our members quite happy with the fact. Chairperson, deputy chairperson, Mr. Mike Ellicott, Francis Nicholson, John Petrinos, Stephen Pugsley, Evelyn Stacey and Vivian White.
Yes, I'm happy with that.
Right.
Somebody's got to keep it moving.
Right. Thank you. Then we move on to the Standards Committee, and we have, but we have 6 nominees and 5 places. So, it's an ask. It's either we need to reduce representatives. First of all, if anyone wishes to stand down, and secondly, we actually have on the Standards Committee 3 members from Somerset West and Taunton. So, comment to you would be, it would be quite nice if we only had 2 members from Somerset West and Taunton, please. So there's a balance of representation. So either somebody willing to stand down or Andy. Thank you very much indeed.
Andy, could you repeat that using your microphone?
Yep.
Thank you. Sorry, I'll drop out of that committee. Committee.
Thank you very much, Andy. That allows us the balance of representation within the Standards Committee. Is everyone happy with that? We have our 5 members. Thank you. We will move on to the Local Access Forum. We have 2 places and 4 nominees. So, again, I'm asking the same thing. Mike?
I'm happy to stand down for that.
Thank you very much. That leaves us with 3.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Why are we, are these numbers set in stone? Is it open to us to say, right, we'll change the number?
Claire?
I don't believe so for this one because it's a statutory body.
But it's a general policy.
Yeah. There are some of
But
them,
for some where we
Francis,
can.
that
Yeah.
there's a bit of flexible representation around, but there are some of those that are statutory appointees we can't.
Okay, I'm going to go for a different tack on the same thing, because I just said to Mike, well, I wouldn't mind doing that, which would just add to the issue, wouldn't it? But clearly Francis has got an interest in this. I mean, this is part of, our primary purpose. So can we have it that we all get advised when the meetings are, and that we can have that as duty, so that we can claim to go there if that, cause, so everybody can actually get there if they want to. Only meets twice a year. That way we're covered.
That's the local access forum.
Yeah.
There's two parts. One, it's open to the public, so there's no reason why every member shouldn't get an invitation. But as an appointee, we have to, because it's a statutory body, we have a specific number appointed to the board. For that group.
Get round the issue so that people might feel they want to take a bit more interest, because clearly this is popular. We've got double the amount of people wanting to do it as places. Is that we put it on as a duty. So if you wish to go, you can.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yes. Well, very definitely. I think we should do that, but we still have to put.
But just to have the two people.
We have to put two names forward, but I think it would be probably important to make sure the local access forum has that ability to be circulated around all members, so that any member has the opportunity, and any member of the public that goes to the local access forum has the opportunity to speak there anyway. Susan.
Yes, that's a good idea. I would say I'm reluctant to drop out, as in having put quite a lot of work into trying to chivvy things along a bit on the access forum and perhaps broaden horizons and remit and thinking. So I would be very keen to stay. I'm normally quite happy to be flexible, but on this one, I would be keen to stay.
I mean, we're really looking at that now.
Yeah.
Because I'm concerned, isn't it, Devon?
Ideally, either one member from. Otherwise, we can take the votes. It's not a problem. Separate votes to choose one candidate from the two Secretary of State and one. Francis.
Mr. Chairman, how many members are there on in the local access forum?
In total.
Yes.
That I couldn't tell you
because
at the moment.
The regulations are clear, not more than 16 members, 2 in the case of no fewer than 17 members, 3.
Yeah.
I believe there are 15 members currently.
Right, well, shall consist of at least 10 and no more than 22. How about changing it to, and whose gift is it? I'm looking at the regulations here. I'm not sure whose gift it is.
Claire.
So I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know. We haven't got Dan or Sue here. I'm just reading the. It's set up by the authority under the Countryside and Rights of Way Act.
Yep.
And the purpose is to advise the Authority Natural England and the local highways authorities about public access. So I think we would need to take advice as to whether it's in our gift or whether it's the local access forums.
The regulations are saying that appointing authority, and that's who I don't know, but I think you've said it's us, may appoint a new member or members at any time, provided that the total number doesn't exceed 22 as a result of the appointment.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I mean, in which case we can provisionally nominate the 3 members, if that's your decision today, but subject to that just being checked in terms of that being, correct process-wise.
That's a very pragmatic way forward.
Yes.
Excellent.
Are members comfortable with that?
We are.
Right. Thank you very much. Exmoor Parish and Consultative Forum. We have Mr. Mike Ellicott, Mr. Vivian White have put their name forward. Stephen.
I'd like to propose that they be our nominees for the chairmanship and vice chairmanship.
Thank you. And we have to elect a chair. Do you have a proposal for chair? As it stands. Mike Ellicott, thank you. And Andrea?
I'd like to second that.
Are members in favour? Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. The next Parish and Consultative Forum meeting is not that far away, is it, right? That's right. At Withypool. Historic Environment Advisory Group.
No issues with that.
No. I
No
missed
issues
one.
with that one. We can just move on.
Yeah. That's fine. Landscape Advisory Group.
With this one, Chairman, we we said in the form that we're seeking 3 members. 4 members have put themselves forward, and we're quite happy that can continue unless anyone does want to stand down. But it's fine to stand as it is. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Exmoor Learning and Engagement Network. 3 members lodged expression of interest. There's a 4th place. Is anyone else interested in the Learning and Engagement Group? It's an area that we're tasked with by the Landscape Review quite definitively. That's where we need to put some of our efforts. So a volunteer would be really appreciated. Go on. Anyone? Yeah.
So Marcus is putting himself forward as the 4th member. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus, very much. The Moorland and Farming Board, I think the numbers are correct. Nature Conservation Advisory Panel.
Again, with this one, we have more members places than members expressing an interest. Again, that is fine. There's no issue with that. But if anyone else wished to join that group, then you're very happy to. Yeah, Linda.
Linda.
I think it would be really good if we could get more members on that in view of the controversy a couple of years ago.
I think
show interest.
Linda, really important on this. Don't forget, members, that the nature recovery vision that caused so much angst and discussion came initially from that. I would definitely want to volunteer if possible. Dominic, thank you very much. I think it's really important, this one, and as we go forward on landscape recovery, nature recovery work and so on, this group is going to have quite a considerable amount more engagement around what we do. Francis. Yep.
There is a 5th place available if anybody else wishes
Francis?
to. And
right.
Francis is putting
much.
herself forward. Thank you, Francis.
Exmoor Rural Housing Network, I think is fine. The Woodland and Forestry Advisory Group, there is another spare place there. Anyone? Jeremy?
Oh, 2 Jeremys.
Excellent. Right. And a Linda. I think again, this is an area, isn't it, where there has been very little activity, but it's going to increase. This is one of the specific targets that we have. It's looking at woodland cover, where it goes, how it works. It's going to have to link with the Landscape Advisory Group as well. So is there a problem with...
There's I'm just quickly looking across at Rob, but I don't think there's any issue with having additional members on that group. So if we wish to have 3, then quite happy to add both Jeremy Yabsley and Linda Blanchard. Thank you.
Chairman, on the question of practicality, where we have these subgroups that actually need to be working together, are we going to look at the possibility of having joint meetings on certain things? Because
yes, we are. Yeah.
There's a very easy answer to that, yes, and I think it's been recognised, especially during the course of COVID, that it's been quite complex when these groups have ended up isolated in discussion, that actually as we move forward now and we're looking at wider activity, that they will desperately need to work together. Equality, Diversity and Inclusion, Task and Finish Group, 4 members lodged in interest. So no, that's fine. There's 4 is fine. Yep, 4 is fine. We can deal with that. External Funding Working Group. There's no issues with that group either. And then we get on to the one that makes us a little more interest. The FIPL Assessment Panel. As you know, we've done the first year of FIPL, moved into allocations for the 2nd year, and there'll be a 3rd year. Andrea.
Chairman, I'm afraid I really struggle to get to these meetings. I know they're online, but unfortunately they are a time that I really, really struggle with. So I'd be delighted if you could relieve me of that particular duty. 4:30 on any day of the week is really bad for me.
Thank you, Andrea. That leaves us with 5 nominees and 4 places. So it's Oh, I haven't read the red bit that Judy very carefully puts there. Been advised that he's ideally looking for members to commit to meeting every 4 to 8 weeks. All right? And the panel has been appointed for the remainder of the FIPL programme. So effectively it's going to be spread over the 2 years because they're allocating money for the 2 years in advance now. So,
Mr. Chairman, I don't want anything to do with it myself, but I have heard discussion about specialist members attending by rotation, people feeling uncomfortable about it. Is that something for this group to sort out, or that sorts this out?
yeah,
Right, okay.
that's why it's definitely a set number of members at the moment. We either take...
Do you wish to move
Can I be
to a vote?
difficult? Can I
Yes.
be really, I just looking down the list, I'm the one person that says I don't want to do it, I'd like to do it, but times are all wrong for me. Looking at the people we've got, we don't need 2 farmers.
No.
You've got to be there because you're the chairman. I'm afraid Mrs. Webber's probably going to be the person that comes off, because I'm just thinking about what you said then, Francis, about specialities. Does that make sense?
Does that make our members happy that I ask Penny Webber if she will stand down for this one? Don't forget, we have significant farmer representation. We have the Exmoor Hill Farm Network there. And I think Andrea's right. It's a case of overload of a specific interest. We will speak to Penny. Okay. Thank you, Andrea. Planning Policy Advisory Group. There are no issues there, but to remind members, as Stephen did earlier on, that at those meeting dates, any member is welcome to attend that, because contributions of any sort will be welcome, especially in light of the rather complex debate we had earlier on and the recognition of the issues that have been brought up there recently. The Rural Enterprise Exmoor Group. What we require really is 1 member from each side of the county. Andrea Davis.
I did volunteer, Chairman, when I saw you the other day.
So I was going to ask very reluctantly whether whether Christine and Francis could sort out between them, or make sure at least one of you attends.
Yes, much better for me. That'd be even better.
I'm happy to work with Francis, and one of us will be there. I think that's very
That, I think, would be absolutely fine with that, if that's acceptable. Thank you very much, Christine and Francis. Simmons Bath Steering Group. We have 2 places. 1 is a substitute, 3 nominees. Mike.
Chair, I'm quite happy to drop out of that one. It wasn't very well resourced last time, that's why I put my name forward, but as we've got 3 of us, I'm quite happy to step down on this one.
So can we then ask, I know one's...
I'm the substitute.
That's what I was going to ask. And I'm sure between yourself and Evelyn, you will sort out. Thank you very much, Andrea. Visit Exmoor, there's 1 place and 2 nominees. I got the red bit I've got written on my piece of paper as well. Having spoken to the Rural Enterprise Manor, it was agreed Nick Thwaites could be added as a substitute to attend the meetings if Evelyn is not available, leaving her as the main rep with her knowledge given its new CIC status, which they have to navigate. Nick, are you happy with that? Yes. Thank you very much indeed. Now, does that take me to the end of that list? I think what we have after that are the ones, the UK National Parks Chairs Forum, which is the chairperson and deputy chairperson. The National Parks England Executive Committee, which will gradually disappear. I suspect under the current situation that we're in. However, we're still there whilst we work our notice period. The National Parks Climate Change Group, Dominic?
Yeah, Chair, happy to continue with that because it involves basically no work at all, apart from Claire and I having the odd chat. From a national perspective, there's been no communication, no meetings, no discussion, not even a one-pager. So maybe climate change isn't that important after all.
I was afraid you would say that. I think
Really
there's
nothing.
some real concern that actually there are some issues that are supposed to be at the top of the table that actually, through what's happening with MPE and NP UK, are not getting addressed at all. And I think there's an issue. We have an MP UK meeting shortly, and I will make sure it's brought up.
I was going to say, can you make sure that's brought up, please? Because
Yes.
it's really worrying.
That's quite concerning, actually, Dominic, that in the era that we're in, there's been nothing.
Jim, could we underline this by having a substitute as well?
Yes, quite happy.
Could we underline that by having a substitute as
Can
well?
is anyone willing to put their name forward? Andrea? Jeremy? Which one of you?
No, you do. No, you do.
Right. I think it is, you know, we've declared made our own declaration in line with the other authorities. Claire.
Just in terms of for information, really, so the officer group is meeting. I believe that the member group, well, it was representatives from a few national parks. I don't believe it was all members, and that was when the original sort of statement was put together in terms of a climate declaration for the national parks. I think probably the reason that it hasn't met since is that we've been working on producing these national park carbon footprints. And once that work has been done, I think that will be then when it goes back to members to sort of start engaging more around, you know, what we need to do, taking that forward. And we'll be bringing back that to you as members within this authority, as well as collectively the group of National Park Authority members as well.
Andrea.
Is this the national parks over the whole country or just England?
It's UK.
Chairman, I'm sorry, I have to say, we've got one missing on here. And it doesn't really make any difference because I don't go anywhere. I do it from home, so it makes no difference at all. But it's on here. The National Parks England Health and Wellbeing Group.
Yes. That's currently in place and continuing, isn't it?
As the person who chairs it tends to drive it, yes.
But as the executive director of National Parks England has just returned to Canada on maternity leave, and a deputy taken over, then you will probably need to still keep driving it. The Exmoor Hill Farm Network, which we have two members in. Oh, the Campaign for National Parks. Andrea, you'll still continue. Thank you very much. North Devon AOB Partnership, Dominic. Yep. And, of course, our independent person down there, Mick. And I am assuming, Mick, you're quite happy to continue being our independent person. I'd rather not. Thank you very much indeed, Mick. Your input is very much appreciated, and your oversight of our meetings. Right. Now I get to loads of bits. No, we don't. We got into a bit more first. Having gone through that, Mike Ellicott. That's to come in a moment. That's to come. All right. That'll be dealt with. We've got to do that under a separate item in a moment or two. So, thank you very much, members, for that. There is nothing more under that, is there? Apart from, we have to. Hang on, I've got to read on what it says. The recommendation is to make appointments to all operational committees, boards, working groups and outside bodies, as agreed. Andrea.
Happy to move.
Thank you. Seconder, please. And all those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Right, we will move on to item 12, our corporate plan report. Over to Claire again.
Me again, I'm sorry. You're very bored of me today. Yes, so we were planning for Sarah to be giving you a sort of bit of an achievements presentation now, but unfortunately, obviously, as she is unwell, we're not doing that, and I'm just going to present the report to you. I won't dwell long on it, given time, but obviously this is our annual report against achievements in our corporate plan for the last 12 months. A few things I just wanted to note was that as well as reporting against the actions in the corporate plan, we have also added, we have the performance indicators that we include in Appendix 1. I've added in a report on our carbon footprint, progress against that action plan in Appendix 2, so that you can see that good progress is being made in terms of addressing our primary carbon emissions, which is our buildings. We're very hopeful that the funding that we've got through the Public Sector Decarbonisation Fund for Pinkery will significantly reduce our carbon emissions, and other works that we're doing, such as the secondary glazing to Exmoor House and other improvements, will also contribute to that. You will see, because of the return to sort of something a bit more like normal business, things like mileage are creeping up again. So there is still more to be done. We're looking at how we can transition in terms of electric vehicles for our fleet, and generally, being more efficient in terms of mileage that needs to be undertaken. But there are further things that we want to be doing, but that just gives you, drawing your attention really to that update around the action plan. We also have in Appendix 3 a summary of the employee demographics and indicators of well-being. It's quite, those of you interested in these things, it is quite interesting reading in terms of our staffing. We do have capacity issues for staff in relation to what we're trying to achieve, and we have also been experiencing some difficulties in recruiting to posts, particularly within planning at the moment. So that is sort of having an impact in terms of our achievements. But otherwise, the statistics are fairly good, and it's even within this sort of period of COVID re-emerging, we are starting to sort of see more staff, being impacted by that. And we've also got the customer feedback report, which is in Appendix 4. So that provides a summary of lots of very nice compliments that we get, but also the complaints, the formal complaints that we receive. And also it just documents our freedom of information, environmental information requests, so you have all that in front of you. I mean, I'm not going to go through the achievements in terms of delivery against the action plan. You can see from the report, it's all documented there. Generally, with the colour coding of our little dots, you can see most of it is green. There has been some where there's not been as much progress as we'd hoped, either from sort of external impacts such as the storm damage which affected field services, some slow progress with some projects such as the family-friendly trails, but is there anything else to pick up? I don't want to just focus on the negatives, because there's a lot of positives, but sometimes it's actually just easier to highlight those things which haven't progressed quite so far. The trial planting of trees in the Upper Exe Valley did not get funded, so we're looking at other ways of delivering that. So that's just a note. And then over the page, on page 10 and 11, the deer count, we do record work that goes on with the deer count, but that hasn't been happening due to capacity. I think a deer count did take place just recently, so we will hopefully get some more information on that. Sorry, I missed one under 4.11. Work on the authority monitoring report on the local plan. We've been focusing on the local plan review, obviously, so that is near completion, and the basic data was made available for the local plan review, but the actual report we're just waiting on finalising. And then on page 11, a couple of things to highlight. We've got the external funding prospectus, which has now been completed. It took a bit longer than we'd hoped. And similarly, car parks, the works on Valley of Rocks have been completed, which is great, but other car park improvements have been delayed and being taken forward as a priority this year. So as I say, sorry to pick out oh no, I've got page 13 as well. Plans for the organisational development strategy, we're focusing on that this year. That's again been delayed due to COVID, and we weren't able to do our studies, work placements in summer for obvious reasons. On the ENPA estate, you'll understand why some issues there that been delayed, partly due to what happened within the team, but also as a lot of people are finding tendering works is quite tricky at the moment. So there are a few delays as a result of that, but generally a lot of works are ongoing and are all in hand. So yeah, sorry to pick out the negatives, but I think you'll see that is a few amongst a whole load of very positive things to report back on. So very happy just to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Any questions? Andy?
Yeah, great report. Lots of great things going on there. The only particular issue I was curious about, I'm sure everybody else knows the answer to this, of course, but I noticed we've got a very strong emphasis on the staff being sort of 45 plus, which you made comment about. And what do we do about attracting younger people to join? Do we actually approach the schools and try and get people to come in and work for us at the younger age groups to build experience to move through in 10, 15 years' time? Perhaps you can help me there.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's certainly something that we have just set up this equality, diversity and inclusion group, which we were dealing with the appointments to at the last item, and it's something that we're very keen on everything that we do as an authority, whether it be external work or internal staffing, that we look to address that. So specifically in relation to the age profile of staff, we do engage with the local colleges, and our HR advisor and head of outreach and education have been to go and talk to them about the sorts of careers that you might be able to take, to come and join within the authority. Normally, one of the things I identified that we weren't able to do is that we also offer placements over the summer from the local schools. So again, they get an opportunity to come and see, the sorts of work that we do, and we haven't been able to do that recently for COVID reasons, but we would hope to pick that up again. So I think that's just a few things that we're looking at doing, but generally, I suppose as well in relation to our recruitment more broadly, things like the flexible working, the more general things which are available to all staff, we're hoping also gives an opportunity to people more generally. Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Christine?
Yes, just following up on that. Sorry, talking to my grandchildren.
Can you turn your microphone on? Thanks, Christine.
Talking to my grandchildren about what we're going to do in the summer holidays and things like that, I was amazed to know that they didn't really know much, they don't live locally, about Exmoor National Park, except that I've mentioned it several times in the last 10 years. But they didn't seem to know about opportunities of coming to the parks or similar places just for a day even, just to go out there with a load of young people and learn about what Exmoor National Park and other parks do. They don't seem to have these types of information experiences in schools anymore. They don't seem to have time to have these casual chats about what you can do and where you can do and where you can get experiences and all the rest of it, which I think is really sad. That young people don't have the knowledge of where they could go to do things, and I wish we could do more. And I know it's all about money and all the rest of it, but there are thousands of young people even around the parks that probably for one reason or another have never even been here. And following on from what you say, it's an opportunity for them to have their eyes widened open as to what possibilities there are or could be in the future. So just something that maybe you could talk to sixth form leads or something about, and just making sure that young people have some more knowledge about opportunities in this lovely area and other people's lovely areas too. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. I think, as I highlighted earlier on when we were looking at the member groups actually, the learning and outreach side is increasingly important, and there's some significant opportunities we need to look at. Notwithstanding, obviously, resource, but we've got to get around that particular problem and work through it. Andrea?
Well, one of my children came for a week's work experience, and thanks to his time with Rob, he's now studying history at Bristol, so it just shows it does have an impact. But I'm actually doing a thing tomorrow with Ilfracombe that has low aspirations amongst their young people generally, and I think we're all aware of the issues around Ilfracombe. But I'm actually going to go talk to the girls in year 10 about future opportunities, so I will make sure that I mention that. It is specifically for girls, and so I think that's part of it. I think we all have those opportunities that come along and that we can go and talk about those things. Christine, you're on the right group to do the inclusion thing, from memory. You're on the right group to do the inclusion thing, so an education outreach from memory from the previous subject. I think that's probably something they need to look at. And can I come back to the over 45 age group? I wonder if we have a recruitment problem. Everybody has a recruitment problem. Just an idea, we do a lot of apprenticeships at the county council, and I think that it probably, for a young person, isn't the place you'd come, because you won't get the breadth of experience here if you were going into a planning career, for example. But I do think we could link up with the two county councils to see if we could offer a placement here for, say, 6 months to those apprentices to show them that this exists and different areas that they could work in. And we could do that, I'm sure, in Devon with Dartmoor as well. I just think about opening people's eyes to the opportunities that there are around. I mean, we have a lot of internships, and those people are always looking for a week doing something slightly different in a different location. But I think there's a bit of work we could approach our neighbouring authorities and see if they've got people that they might want to give a bit of breadth of experience to.
Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you, Andreas. Yes, certainly happy to take that away and talk further about that. I mean, we do also have interns, or have had in the past had interns. So, you know, I think we did try the apprenticeship route a while ago, and that wasn't really very easy for us. So I think that's perhaps quite a good suggestion for linking up with others. Just on Christine's point, I mean, obviously the education outreach team do go and engage with the local schools and not so local ones as well. You know, they've put quite a lot of effort in the past in going to schools in Bristol, and, you know, it takes a lot more input to engage, you know, particularly to address those, you know, audiences who perhaps don't have that background and knowledge and experience of being in the outside, let alone coming to national parks. But that is certainly a priority for them. I guess it, you know, comes down to capacity in terms of how much they're able to do. We did have some additional funding through Generation Green, which was really positive and enabled us to, you know, to deliver some more experiences, including the Young Ranger programme, which was another thing actually I should have mentioned when Andy asked about, you know, getting young people engaged in the work of the authority. We do have that Young Ranger programme. That funding has finished, but we are looking to see if we can get some further funding for that to continue that on. But it is another one of these ones where, unfortunately, it's project funded based, and so it's very up and down, and you know, according to what money we can get in. But no, I think the team, you know, certainly feel very passionate about getting out and engaging with young people, and not just directly through going through schools. It's about, you know, providing the right kind of materials and information in the national park centres. If people do come, there's some great things for the kids, and you know, for them to do. So I think we do a fair bit across the piece to try and get that message across. Yeah.
Susan, sorry.
And just to pick on that, the point about the recruitment and employment, from my own experience, particularly working at wildlife trusts and other kind of environmental education organisations, you know, these jobs are actually very sought after. So once someone gets one, people aren't necessarily in a rush to move, and there aren't necessarily a lot about. So I think that's the other side of that coin. There's loads and so many people want to work in, you know, nature conservation. You have to kind of be a volunteer for at least a year or two, which I did years ago, and it's still the same, and there's more and more now. So I think that's the other part of it as well. It's very sought after, and people aren't ever. A lot of people at Wildlife Trust that I worked with 7, 8 years ago are still there, and quite, you know. So, you know, that's the other part to that. But just one little thing, so yeah, a really great report and so much fantastic stuff going on. I just wanted to check on one thing about the carbon neutral national park. I kind of know the answer, but I wanted to check when it talks about working towards being a carbon neutral national park. I know there's the kind of the national park authority, us being carbon neutral, and there's the park, and it always worries me because that is so not in our gift. The carbon neutral national park as a whole is so much beyond. So I just was wanting to be clear that about the separation, or are we now trying to work on the bigger picture as well? I think.
So we have a bit of both. So the declaration that was made by the authority in 2019 was about committing as an organisation to work to being carbon neutral by 2030, and that is what this Appendix 2 reports on. So that's more within our gift, obviously, as you say, what we need to do around our own operations to become carbon neutral. But the declaration did also commit us to work with our partners in Devon and almost said Cornwall then. Sorry, Devon and Somerset. Devon and Somerset around reducing, carbon within the national parks as a whole. I referred earlier on in the meeting to some work that we were doing with all of the national parks around getting an updated carbon footprint for the place. That work is on underway at the moment, and I think that I'm very keen then, once we have that piece of work, that we will then be able to look a bit more broadly at targeting what we as an authority can do with our partners in looking to reduce carbon emissions from the national parks to place. But that will be very much partnership working. It's not obviously something that we'll be able to to do on our own.
Good, and I do hope, given the huge variety in terms of national parks and scale and existing infrastructure and all these kind of issues, that isn't going to be something that we're going to be sort of benchmarked. Is it something that definitely wants to benchmark as well between national parks? Because that's not going to work, given, in terms of the public transport lack of in some parks and everything. Just as one.
No, I agree with you at the moment. It's not something that is being proposed. I think it will be a discussion that we would have to have if that comes up. But certainly, within England, DEFRA are very keen that as national park authorities, this is something that we are really looking to work on and contribute to. And certainly as an authority in our national park grant now, the priorities that we've been given are around nature and climate and people in place. So, there's a definite sort of expectation there. But I think that whole question around benchmarking is a slightly sort of tricky one that we'll have to navigate when we get to it. Yeah.
Really concerning for a national park of this size with the resources that we have. I think Eric had a point.
Yeah, something different, Mr. Chairman. I think it's page 10 that refers to the annual deer count. Now, it says figures aren't yet out, but I assume they will follow trends of recent years. Because of the increase in incidence of TB in deer, this is becoming a major problem, and that happens where you get overpopulations. And as of recent years, I suspect the trend will show. You've got an area around Simmersbath, especially Horson, Prayway Head area, where you've got 90% of Exmoor's deer congregated. They've been driven out by the growing numbers of pheasant shoots, gamekeeper activity, and in that area, the TB concerns are grown year on year. It'll be interesting to see if that trend continues. And the interesting question then, if it has, what can be done about it?
I think, yes, some very, very pertinent questions there, Eric. But hopefully, from what I gather, there will be answers to some of those bits shortly. And we will update you as soon as possible on that. But the deer count provides that opportunity to be able to enlighten us to what is where and when.
As is obvious, they're as iconic to Exmoor as the Exmoor pony, but they're, in effect, being driven almost onto a postage stamp in terms of areas which they used to be found, and it's not necessarily good.
No, I would agree. Mike Kelly.
Yes, Chair, just related to Eric's point there, if we look at page 9, item 12, working landscapes. It talks about the impact of game shooting. Now that it's been said that it's got an impact in terms of deer movement, for example, which is interesting, but it's also got an impact in terms of nature recovery and other strategies. It seems to be a part of the jigsaw that we need more information on, and I just wondered what the anticipated work programme would be to try and fill that gap.
I might ask Rob to come in here. I think it's something that we have been looking at quite a lot over the last few years. There is a difficulty in gathering a lot of the information that we would ideally like. There has been some work that has been done through landscape monitoring, which has looked at impacts of game shooting, and there's been some work that's been done around sort of planning and the infrastructure around game shooting. But otherwise, it's been through sort of periodic engagement with the game shoot industry, just to sort of highlight issues and discuss with them. But it's an ongoing sort of piece of work for those reasons, really. But Rob, is there anything you want to add to that?
It's definitely ongoing. I'm sure Rob will. A few bits to add here.
Apparently the question is, once you've done this bit of work, what can you do about it?
I think that will be a discussion and debate you will have in this room, undoubtedly.
Exactly, and I mean, we've done work mapping the extents of shooting and how it's changed over, over the decades. And what the evidence shows is that the area shot at over on Exmoor hasn't really increased vastly at all. So it's not a change in extent. What it is a change in intensity. And so we get that evidence from other sources, really, obviously not from mapping it. And I think that goes absolutely back to what you said, Eric, in terms of the displacement of deer, because it's the intensity of shooting. So in other words, shooting on many more days in the season, which makes it much more unsettling for deer. So we've noticed that trend of concentration on the forest. In truth, we're sort of, all we can do is gather data at this stage, because we don't have any powers. We're expecting a quieter winter because of the restrictions brought in by DEFRA in terms of moving birds, so we expect this winter to be quieter. But then from some of the anecdotal evidence we have, some shoots will be more affected than others, and probably the smaller ones will be more affected by the shortage of birds, but larger shoots will operate as normal. So we are literally gathering evidence, and that's I think all we can do, in the expectation that eventually there will be some form of regulation, and we will be able to provide evidence at that stage.
I think, Rob, there'll potentially be an expectation that as we progress through the next 12 months, it'd be nice to see you a couple times more in front of the authority members discussing this, possibly a members' forum item, possibly a paper detailing what data we have and where for members at some point.
Yeah.
It's obviously an area of concern and an area that's recognised.
And I think the other thing that's worth saying is that when we've discussed shooting-related issues just before COVID, Sarah called a meeting, and the number of officers in the room was quite surprising, because it affects so many aspects of the national park. And so it was one of those things that doesn't affect just a few of us. It works across a lot of work streams here, the impacts of shooting. That's probably all I need to say, I think.
Thank you very much. I don't want to prolong this debate because you're going to miss your lunch. So very briefly, Jeremy, and very briefly, Dominic, and then we'll move to the recommendation.
Just going back to the deer issue, it is noticeable the increase in deer numbers in the middle of the county. They were really down before COVID, but because shooting was stopped of deer through COVID, the numbers have dramatically risen again. I just thought it would be interesting.
Yeah, quick. I mean, this report, if I understand, I'm often struggling to understand how these reports all work together, and the interaction between your corporate plan and actually what we're just talking about, which is all our various groups and committees and partnership groups, and then the partnership plan itself, because because your first diagram, the corporate plan at a glance, has, of course, like a log frame style, has outcomes. These are the things we're aiming towards. But the report, of course, is only about outputs. And of course, some of the things we've just been coming up with is we can get lost, I don't mean this pejoratively, but lost in the weeds talking about deer numbers, very specific output type stuff. But then a really important issue about the shooting, which actually is a cross-cutting theme in a way, in that, as Rob said, when it was discussed, lots of different people from different groups wanted to come in and actually be involved in that discussion. And it occurs to me that the way this works at the moment is that those, if you like, cross-cutting themes, I don't want to use this sort of technical project management language too much because you can get lost in it, but because everything becomes cross-cutting ultimately. But things like climate change and nature recovery, and it strikes me, for instance, under FIPL, FIPL's reported in prosperity, but of course it's heavily relevant to nature recovery. And so, of course, you've got to choose a place and go, well, this is where it lives. The trouble is, what I'm still struggling to understand after a couple of years sat here, is how we actually gather back from these various groups we talked about earlier in their membership, what's happening on those discussions, how that's reported back and processed, how that feeds back into then the work you're doing, and vice versa. So, for instance, the Farming and Moorland Board, at the last meeting, Robin sort of said, oh, well, that's something the Farming and Moorland Board should do. What happens next? How does that get tasked to them? How do they report back on it? So those are the things I'm still, and maybe it's just I haven't understood it yet, and I just sit here for another 10 years to do this, but I still haven't understood basically how these things, working parts, move together. I hope that helps.
I think, to be honest, Dominic, it's an area we've recognised. COVID has caused immense problems with that, and actually we're looking actually pretty proactively about how we link the groups together, and possibly there was previously relatively regular meetings of at least the chairs of the groups to pull that information together and put its relevance into context. I think we need to get back onto that to make it properly relevant again. It has been quite difficult when meetings have effectively been facilitated through a Zoom context. I think those are the bits we've been lacking on. Is that accurate, wouldn't it, Claire? I'm going to allow Steve the last word on this before we move to the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. It was a small point on page 6, if I may. The family-friendly cycle trails, I understand fully the reasons why there has been no, they're all, the reasons are fully noted there, but I'm thinking about the future. There's a lot of groups now are certainly pressing me in my ward to have cycle trails and cycle tracks to form sustainable travel, recreation and health. And whatever grid or network begins to evolve on the moor, don't forget that there is a grid and network beginning to evolve out with the moor, and that there should be linkage between the two as they begin to evolve. That was my only point.
Thank you. I think that's a point that will be well noted, and we will make sure that's passed on to Dan Barnett, and of course through those members that are sat on the local access forum. So, thank you very much. I have a recommendation in front of me to note the achievements, delivering commitments, to note members and leadership teams, thanks to staff for continuing to deliver these. Some quite significant challenges there with pressure on staff, as has been discussed and so on earlier on. And delegate to the Finance and Performance Advisory Panel and the leadership team further scrutiny, performance across the corporate plan, for the reporting period to 31st of March. You will have... Thank you very much indeed. Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Andrea.
Can I ask a question? Does this sufficiently cover the point that Dominic made? Because I suspect it may not.
What we will do is we will ensure that the point is noted, and we report back as to the actions that we're taking to pull those groups together for reporting purposes.
Do you want me to just very quickly say something on that, because I didn't come back on that. So I think the relationship between the partnership plan and the corporate plan is that we, as an authority, so the partnership plan is something which statutorily we have to produce. It's led by the authority, but we call it a partnership plan because we recognise it has to be delivered in partnership. And in my mind, that's where we set out the outcomes that we're seeking to achieve. The corporate plan is for us as an organisation, as the authority, which sets out the actions that we are going to take and lead on to deliver those outcomes. So as we, we don't do that in isolation, obviously, so there is a link between them because we do it with our partners and through our partnership plan groups. So this report is, obviously internal focused in that it's thinking about, the actions that we've undertaken. When we start to think about, well, what has that achieved in relation to outcomes, that's where we'll be looking at state of the park reporting and partnership plan review, which is what we'll be starting to work. Well, we're working on the state of the park at the moment, and we'll be thinking about partnership plan review next year. The point about the partnership plan groups and bringing them together is also very well made. It's something we're very conscious of, and we are looking sort of through a thematic basis to bring groups together to work on cross-cutting issues. So, for example, climate change, as you mentioned, will be on the back of having this carbon footprint work done. We'll be inviting all of the groups to come together in the autumn to look at climate change, and then we'll be looking to do the same with some of the other cross-cutting themes. So that's very, very quickly our sort of approach to dealing with some of those points. But I'm very happy to follow up with you after the meeting if you want to know more about that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Had a proposer and a seconder for the recommendations. Can I have all hands, show of hands for those in favour, please? That is unanimous. Thank you, Judy. We will move on then to item 13. Personnel update. We have a starter, Harry Britton, as a seasonal assistant ranger. I can assure you he's made a very good start. My granddaughter went with him rock pooling around Lynmouth the other day. I'm not sure whether it's good or bad, but she now wants to go again. And one leaver is Lynn Henderson, as resignation as a corporate support assistant. Moving on to item 14, business of urgency. I have one item for a business of urgency, and that is around the Standards Committee. Now, you'll have to bear with me while I read this. I did suggest it appears that the Standards Committee will not be quorate to vote as of the number of members that we have here that's on it. So, Standing Order 19.2, as I quoted standing orders earlier on to Mr. Foxwell, and we are bound by them, unfortunately, or fortunately, actually, I would suggest. Standing Order 19.2 requires that after the annual meeting and on the same day as the annual meeting, the authority must convene a meeting of the Standards Committee for the purposes of electing a chairperson and deputy chairperson. However, following the appointment of the members, at item 11, it appears the Standards Committee would not be quorate if it were held today. Therefore, I'd like to propose two motions. The first motion will be to suspend the requirements of Standing Order 17.1, because unless they're suspended, we will not be able to propose an amendment to Standing Order 19.2, as Standing Order 17.1 provides for the notice requirements, which cannot be met in the current circumstances. And the second motion is to amend Standing Order 19.2 to waive the requirement. The Standards Committee must meet on the same day as this particular meeting, annual meeting, and allow the meeting to take place on a subsequent date. The second part is to make the amendment to Standing Order 19.2 temporary, so that once the Standards Committee meeting takes place, the original wording of Standing Order 19.2 is reinstated for next year. So, first motion. Francis.
Call me antediluvian or whatever, but is there another way around it, which is that the Standards Committee opens its meeting, decides it's not quorate, and postpones itself?
They can't hold a meeting if they're not quorate.
But you often get to a point where you start the meeting, discover you're not quorate, and then adjourn.
Well, if we do two quick votes now, we've achieved exactly the same thing and complied with the standing orders. So, thank you, Stephen. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. Are all those in favour? Right. Thank you very much indeed. So, once the Standards Committee is convened following the meeting, it will elect a chairperson and deputy chairperson, and we will set a date shortly. At that point,
Is that the second motion?
that is both, Stephen proposed both the first and the second motion at the same time. So, thank you very much, members.
Can I just make a quick point?
You may.
Yeah, the process you've just gone through there for the Standards Committee, why could not, or it did not, apply to Mr. Foxwell this morning?
It was not a matter of urgency. So, and it was not notified before, which, as for a matter of urgency, we have to be notified every time before. So, members, I'd just like to say we have reached a time. It's lunchtime. I thank you very much for your engagement this morning at the annual meeting. We have a planning committee meeting that we want to start promptly at 1:30, or we will be starting promptly at 1:30. There are one or two bits that we have for a members' forum. So, first of all, I will close the authority meeting at this point.